The vaccination is widely available, and states are lifting their shutdown rules, which means small businesses are open for business again. But many aren't hanging open signs on their physical storefronts. They are embracing e commerce or hybrid model. Kabbage, the online lender owned by American Express, recently surveyed small businesses and found 57% are open again. Of the survey respondents, one third credited e commerce for their recovery. Kathryn Petralia, co founder and president of Kabbage, is here to discuss those findings and much more. Hi, Kathryn. Thanks so much for taking out the time today.
Thanks for having me.
So, as you guys know from your survey, small businesses are opened again, they're recovering, and a lot of that has to do with e commerce. So, what's going on? What drove it? Was it just the pandemic, and is this here to stay?
I definitely think it's here to stay, but for sure, I think businesses had to rethink what they were doing when they realized that if they were a retail location, they realized they needed a new way to run their business. And I think it's really exciting how quickly these owners were able to determine what technology they needed to use, how to get their products online, how to fulfill the products once they were sold, and how to find customers. I mean, I think it's such a great collection of skills that they had to develop in order to make that transition. And the best thing is they get to keep their brick and mortar businesses too.
So, is that what you're seeing? A lot of hybrid models, or are people abandoning their retail locations and just going all in with e commerce?
What I've seen more of has been businesses that are keeping their retail location if they can, if it's feasible, and then also adding e-commerce to their equation. And also using some really cool tools like social media, becoming influencers in the products, where they have expertise, and developing a following of people who say, wow, this person really understands this business and this product. And, I'm excited to buy what they really like.
That's really cool. So, does this stay? Was this all, driven by the pandemic, and now vaccinations are here? Do we just go back to life as it used to be, or is this a new world?
I think it's a new world for two reasons. One of them is because I think these businesses have now found new markets. If you were a brick and mortar retail location, your market was in your backyard. And, maybe we call it the bridge and tunnel crowd, which we stole from New York here in Atlanta. But, but we, the folks who come in on the weekends and do a little shopping, maybe that was part of the customer base, but now you have a global audience, people who can be anywhere in the world and buy your products. And that's really exciting, I think, for a lot of these businesses. And the other part of it is consumer changes. I think a lot of people weren't used to buying so many things online. What I hear about most is groceries. I still go to the grocery store. I like to pick out my own raspberries. But I know so many people who said, I'm never going to the grocery store again. Like, this is amazing. What a great, time saver. And I think people feel the same way about e-commerce. Now they know what to look for and what questions to ask and what products to buy.
So, the survey showed that small businesses expect a larger portion of their revenue to come from e-commerce going forward. So, small businesses, what are they using? Are they using certain tools? Are they using free apps? How are they able to pivot so quickly? And now this has become so important to them.
I think most of them are using tools that already existed, whether it's, companies like Amazon and eBay and Etsy, where people can, sell their products individually, or companies like Shopify that allow small businesses to set up a whole store really quickly. So I think there are a lot of really great tools out there for small businesses, and they're just figuring out what works best for them, what attracts the right customers. And of course, many of them are multi-channel. They're on all of the platforms because they realize that's the place to be. So I think these small businesses, as always, have been very ingenious in the way they've approached this particular market.
Another thing from the survey showed that the companies that were embracing e-commerce are doing well, the others that weren't, not so much. Is there a way now, as we exit the pandemic, for them to shift and embrace it more, or is it too late?
Well, I don't think it's too late, but I think it's not appropriate for all businesses. We were talking earlier today in the office about, and we have a few folks in the office now and then, we're talking about dry cleaners in particular, and how hard it must be for them, because not only are people not commuting and going to the dry cleaner that's near their office or near the train station, but they're also wearing yoga pants all day. And so they don't have to go to the dry cleaners because you don't need to take those there. And so I don't know that an e-commerce solution necessarily helps them, but I've noticed local dry cleaners really moving into things like more alterations and more wash and fold and more things that still save people time. Again, that's hard to do. You can't deliver it digitally, but you can market digitally. And that's where I think a lot of businesses that aren't retail, that are restaurant, that are service providers have really been embracing digital for marketing to customers and finding new customers.
So, we're getting out of the pandemic. Business optimism seems high based on your survey. 57% of small businesses are operational. What's the growth driver into the future as we head into the summer and beyond? Are there certain areas of the market that are booming, others that you should stay away from?
There is this K-shaped recovery that you've heard of. It's often described for like consumers and how they're going to get through this pandemic, but I think it really applies to small businesses. There are some industries that have done really well, like way better than you'd have expected during the pandemic, not healthcare related, things like home services, lumber, furniture, home design, all kinds of things like related to people's homes are doing super well because we're all stuck in our houses and we're like, oh my gosh, I can't take this kitchen anymore. It's terrible. I got to get a new one. So, you're seeing those kind of behaviors. And I think there are two industries that have had a harder time. I think businesses that are dependent on an urban commuting workforce. Those are having a harder time. And anybody in the travel related industry is clearly struggling. I think like restaurants, they figured out how to deliver food, how to help folks pick it up. I mean, I think a lot of restaurants I know, like just in my neighborhood, see they're doing great. You don't see a lot of people sitting in the restaurant, but you see a lot of bags sitting on the counter waiting to be picked up. And so I think that's great. So I think, the 57% is a great number, but it means that there's still a lot of businesses that haven't recovered and aren't recovering. And what we care about is those very small businesses. And, the number one sentiment about we know we're recovered when we get to 100% employment of our workforce, of our employees. Once we're able to feel comfortable that we can continue to employ all of our folks, then we feel like we're there. And so I think the fact that 43% of businesses aren't there yet says something to us, and that's a big number.
In the survey, what else, was there any other reasons to be optimistic? Was it all digitally driven, or are there other things that are making small businesses upbeat about the outlook?
I think some of the things are around stimulus and around financial aid that's being provided by the government. I think that's really been useful to small businesses. PPP loans for sure have been very welcomed and well utilized by a lot of small businesses. And then the fact that there's a stimulus to consumers continues to drive spending into businesses that allows them to, continue to operate. And I think that's what's driving a lot of the optimism. And of course, vaccines. I think people see the light at the end of the tunnel and, they're like, okay, we know we can make it. We know we can get there. The numbers keep going up. If you're inoculating millions of people a day, then, you're going to get there.
So finally, this year, surprisingly, there was a record number of applications for new business licenses. And that flies in the face of a pandemic with all these shutdowns and businesses going under. So what's behind that? What do you think's driving that?
It seems like it doesn't make sense in light of a pandemic, but what we've seen over decades is that in a downturn, an economic downturn, you often see more new business starts. There are, all these stories of companies like Microsoft and Apple and Oracle and Facebook starting in a downturn. And some of it is because that's when the entrepreneurs have a minute to think about the business they want to do. And, people are at home and they're spending less time commuting and they're spending more time with their families and it's generating ideas. And that always happens. And so I think it's actually really consistent behavior, even though it's hard to imagine. But I think it's actually just the same thing we've always done, and there are just more businesses, and so as a result, you're seeing more business starts.
Great. And finally, as businesses go back into growth mode, they'll need funding. Are small businesses shut out, or is there available capital?
There's going to be plenty of available capital. I think what you're seeing across the board is all the folks who provided financial services to small businesses before are just waiting at the gates, for folks to be ready to use it. And some businesses are ready now, but I think a lot of the conventional wisdom is wait until the relief program is over, and then you can get out to those businesses. So you're not basically competing with free money.
Great. Well, this was a great conversation. So I want to thank you so much for taking out your time today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.